Hello, and welcome to the MindfulOpus podcast. I'm your host, Jo Zacany, violist with the Cleveland Orchestra, yoga teacher, and coach for classical musicians. Here, we switch from grind to kind in our artistic process so that artists like you can avoid burnout, ditch performance anxiety, and create a thriving, healthy life on and off stage. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Hello, fellow Opus creator. It feels so good to be kicking off this season 2 with you. Our first season together was such a ride, and the connection I feel to you every time I sit down and chat into this microphone is something I truly cherish. So here we are. In case you missed the trailer, our second season is about exploring that inner world, the human behind the art, so to speak. It's about creating that inner compass that helps guide you along your own unique path so you can hopefully make decisions and create a life rooted in what truly lights you up the most. In my personal experience, both as a human and in coaching fellow other humans, I have found that one of the most powerful places to start building that inner compass is getting to know your own personal values. What are they exactly? You may have heard this values thing thrown around before, and the fact is, I wasn't really super clear on what it all meant either. It wasn't until I did my own values work with my coach that I discovered the true power behind them. These guiding personal mini vows, so to speak, that keep you anchored internally so you can better navigate any external storminess. The way I look at values is that they are guiding words and personal North Stars. They help you figure out the why behind what you do and create that internal clarity on what characteristics within yourself are important, no, crucial, to your overall well-being. Because here's what I started to notice in my own life. When I'm betraying my values, I get this icky feeling that takes over my body. Suddenly, I'm living and performing outside of what feels right and true to me. This can show up in many different ways in my life, but I usually can catch it if I'm people-pleasing, saying yes to things I shouldn't, giving in on my boundaries, carefully watching what I say, not feeling safe to fully express myself, and almost like I'm wearing someone else's skin around my personality. I'm someone who has felt that way many times in my life, and I think particularly in our field, being a performing artist, when I'm living outside of my values, I can feel like a circus animal, having to perform for the world rather than create from something real and grounded inside of me. And here's the important piece. That feeling of wearing someone else's skin or being that circus animal, in hindsight, almost every time I felt that way, it has been because I was betraying one of my core values. Have you ever felt this way? I know many of the people I work with have. And that's where these values can come in so handy, not as some abstract personal development exercise, but as a way to come back to yourself when you start to feel that misalignment creeping in. Don't just take my word for it, though. There's plenty of research out there that supports why values are such an important part of cultivating that inner compass. Dr. Shalom Schwartz, known for his cross-cultural research on human values, defines values as guiding principles in people's lives, meaning they aren't fleeting preferences, but internal standards that shape our choices and influence our behavior. Psychologist Stephen C. Hayes, founder of acceptance and commitment therapy, defines values as freely chosen, verbally constructed consequences of ongoing, dynamic, evolving patterns of activity. Oof! That's a heavy one. I really like it though, because it points to the idea that values aren't goals you achieve, but guiding principles you live by. And of course, my favorite, Brené Brown, writes in her book, Dare to Lead, integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them, which to me is the most important piece of this work. It's not about labeling yourself. It's about how you actually show up and implement these values in the world. So if you put all of that together, values work becomes this deeply researched, very human experience of clarifying what matters most to you and then choosing to act from that place, even when it's hard. Maybe even especially when it's hard. And when you don't, in my experience, that's when that icky, skin-wearing feeling shows up again. Now, the way I see people betraying their values in our classical music world is pretty layered. But let's start with taking a look at your values from an artistic standpoint and how they relate to your career. I see people being pushed into certain career paths by their well-meaning mentors and teachers. You should get an orchestra job. Go get that PhD. You should be a professor. Maybe you want to be a soloist, but I think you should aim for being a principal of an orchestra instead. Yes, these are all real-life experiences that I have seen in my work. None of these pieces of advice are a problem on their own necessarily, except for the fact that they all have the word should in them. I am not a fan of shoulding on anybody, and I think our classical music culture would benefit from a lot less shoulds and a lot more coulds. Because here's the thing, that inner spark or that inner desire you feel towards something is often connected to one of your core values. And that value is probably the most connected to who you want to ultimately be. Let's say one of your artistic values is collaboration. Your favorite moments are when you're on stage working and creating in a large ensemble. Then maybe a career in an orchestra, chamber music ensemble, choir, or band is up your alley. On the flip side, let's say your favorite moments as a musician aren't solely on stage, but you really thrive when you're working with a student one-on-one. Nothing lights you up more than being in service of someone else's growth. That value, service, may be your guide that a career in teaching is worth exploring. These values also help shape the artist and person you are, no matter what career you choose. Let's say for the sake of this exercise that your values include authenticity and kindness. If you're in the practice room, be kind to yourself in your work and lean into what artistically feels the most authentic to you. Outside the practice room, maybe authenticity is what helps you speak your truth, even when it's uncomfortable, and kindness is what helps guide you in your words. The most obvious value for us classical musicians is that every time we step on stage, we have to harness a little bit of courage. You may remember one of my previous episodes, Performance Nerves, where I specifically tied this value of courage to helping you get up on stage and perform a little easier. You could also see how courage could help make some tough moves off stage too. Maybe it's what helps you move through unexpected challenges or push through anything that may feel scary, like signing up for your first yoga class as a newbie or signing up for that first 5K race. Some real-life ways I've seen these values in action is in the work I do with my clients. A teacher leaving their job when they realized their personal values of time and autonomy simply didn't match the structure of that institution. A performing musician stepping into an administrative role because community building and connection were actually higher on their values list than being the talent on stage. An auditioner shifting from playing for other people's approval and praise to being anchored in their own self-worth and kindness, which changed their entire audition experience. I hope you're starting to see the depth to which these values can guide you, not just in the big moments, but in the small daily actions that shape the artist and human you're becoming. So to help make this more tangible, I'll end this episode by sharing a framework I use with my clients to help them find their own personal values. So you may want to grab a pen and paper for this one, or if you're out and about in the world, you can save this episode and revisit later. First, start off with downloading a values list. Both Brené Brown and James Clear have free ones you can easily find on their websites. Next, circle your top 8 to 10 that you are most drawn to. Try to pick values that feel intrinsically most like you, not necessarily aspirational. You want them to feel like when the world is calm and nothing's getting in the way, they feel true and grounding to you. It doesn't mean they happen perfectly all the time, but when you imagine them, they somehow feel like they are a piece of who you are. Now comes the tricky part. Narrow that list down to 3 to 5 values max. You may notice that some of them overlap or fit into one another somehow, which can help you make your final decision. Once you have your final 3 to 5, write down a personal definition for each of them. Get to know what they mean to you personally and how they can help guide your life both on and off stage. So you cement that connection to these words. And then use them, not just as pretty words on a piece of paper, but as your real-life filtering system. Let them guide you in your daily choices. And when you start to feel that icky misalignment, that circus animal energy, wearing someone else's skin feeling, go inwards and check back in with them. Ask yourself, which value am I possibly betraying at the moment? And which one can help me feel anchored in who I am and who I want to become? Finally, I'm also reminded of a quote by Glennon Doyle. I'm not sure if it was written in one of her books or if maybe I heard it on one of her podcast episodes, but it's something about how integrity is when you integrate your inner and outer worlds so they're in alignment. So maybe that's where our values and our inner compass can help us as we all try to create the integrated life we want, one opus at a time. Thanks for being here. And I'll see you in a couple weeks with our first phenomenal guest of the season. Trust me, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. See you then, and bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Mindful Opus podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider adding the show to your library, write a blurb in the review section, or share it with someone in your circle. For more about my work, you can find me on Instagram at MindfulOpus or my website, MindfulOpus.com. And while you're there, don't forget to grab that free well-being resource waiting for you. Until next time, my fellow Opus creator, keep creating the life you want, one opus at a time.